everybody, and welcome to Into the Weeds podcast here on Military Broadcast Radio. I'm Amber, and today I have Nancy from the Toll podcast joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me, Amber.
Thank you for being with me. This is going to be a very interesting conversation, and you're actually the one who got me into it, right?
So I walked by this booth, and a guy is selling his book, and I was like, real life monsters. I've been chasing one of those.
Yeah.
Season 2, Poison Control. And so I stopped and I talked to him, and I was like, I want to buy this book. And so the next day I was like, I'm going to buy my friend Amber this book. We're going to read it and we're going to do something. And she was like, oh, yeah? Well, I'm going to have him on a show. And I was like, let's go. So I'm very excited. Thank you for doing this project with me. So interesting to really break down serial killers. And we can always learn more when we're trying to do what we do.
Yeah. When I was reading that, I mean, I was just literally just focused on two people out of my whole life, you know, that I've come across that just fit every box. And we'll get into that a little bit with Steve. But before we bring him up, I'll actually read his bio right now. So this is going to be an interview with Stephen J. Giannangelo. Sorry, I'm really bad at Italian names. Stephen has a master's degree in forensic psychology and spent more than 20 years in law enforcement before retiring as a special agent supervisor with the Criminal Investigation Division of the Illinois Department of Revenue. During his career, he also worked on task forces with the Illinois State Police and the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. He's been teaching university courses in criminology, offender psychology, and serial murder since 1998, and has written 4 books examining serial murder and psychology behind extreme violence. Those include The Psychopathology of Serial Murder, Real Life Monsters, A Psychological Examination of the Serial Murderer, Monsters in the Mirror, and his newest book, Irresistible Impulses, Defending the Insanity of Serial Murder. Today, we're going to focus quite a bit on real-life monsters and talk about what decades of studying serial murders have taught Steve about the people behind these crimes and what contributes to someone becoming a serial murderer, and whether understanding the psychology behind these individuals changes the way that we look at them. So we're going to get into the weeds, and I'm going to bring Stephen up.
The interview of the week is brought to you by Jersey Mike's, a sub above.
Hello, Steve. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. I'm enjoying being here.
I don't know. We could go down all kinds of rabbit holes. So this is going to be an interesting conversation.
Sounds good to me.
And like Nancy said, she bought your book and brought it to me. And when I started reading it, I was extremely fascinated. And so I was like, let's reach out to him and see what he has to say.
Sounds great.
Can you just tell us a brief little bit about how you got into wanting to actually know about serial murderers and serial killers?
Well, I'll start out when I was an impressionable little kid in Boston, Massachusetts. I was sort of obsessed with movie monsters back then, and my mom used to let me go to bed at 6 o'clock in the evening so she could wake me up at midnight and I could watch horror movies when I was like 8 years old. So all of my aunts and uncles said the kid's going to be a mess, and I guess they were right, because that's kind of what I got interested in. But the point that I'm making is that those monsters never scared me at any point in time. They were just on the screen, even as a kid. But living in Boston in the early '60s, we had a guy named Albert DeSalvo show up, who was known as the Boston Strangler, and I saw the physical change in my mother when this was going on, and she was afraid to open the door. And I thought, I'm pretty sure that's what a real monster is, and it sort of changed everything for me, even at that age. And later on, when I went to grad school, I took clinical psychology and abnormal psychology, and I realized that these serial killers that I never got over thinking about, especially after I saw interviews with Kenny Bianchi and with Ted Bundy, they were different. They're different people, and I just had to know more about them, and I haven't stopped looking at them since.
Okay. Yeah, my introduction to serial killers was pretty early because of John Wayne Gacy, because of The Clown.
Right.
And I remember being 8 years old and watching it and freaking out, and being scared of clowns for the rest of my life, and finding out that John Wayne Gacy also dressed up as a clown just made it even more real in my mind, so that really that was my introduction to serial killers.
A lot of people are afraid of clowns, that's for sure.
What about you, Nancy?
Well, I found a cassette tape in the trailer on a pig farm in Western Missouri where we live. And I was like, what is this cassette tape? It was in the kitchen cabinet. And so I took it to my room and I put it in my tape recorder and I listened to it over and over and over and over. And somebody had snuck a recorder into this shed. It was like a big Morton building type building where all the guys in the community would shoot shit and drink beer. And somebody had hit a tape recorder and that was the tape. And there wasn't anything on it that, I could tell, but my curiosity got the best of me. And I was just like, what is on this tape? So that's my clearest memory of like just being curious about cases and what could be and just asking different questions. And so when I got a job in news and journalism, I just kind of went down the path of looking at serial killers and really studying that and getting interested in it. And I took a course with Missouri broadcasters about BTK, and it was about the journalists at Cake who dealt with that and their experiences. And it was just really fascinating to me. So, and now I have a case, season 2, Poison Control, and she's a suspected serial killer and I'm trying to catch her. So there we go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm trying to figure out who the Lawton serial killer is as well. So we're on the hunt for serial killers, even though I definitely didn't intend to get into that business, being in ministry for a really long time. But yeah, I find it fascinating that women happen to be the predominant consumer of that kind of content. What do you think? Why do you think
that's
that
absolutely
is?
True?
Yeah, why do you think?
That's a good question because that's something that's been absolutely consistent the whole time that I've looked at this. Matter of fact, I knew an instructor at Northeastern who made a comment to a male student that I know that he questioned why males were interested in this at all, because there were so few of them that were interested in the topic. Mm-hmm. But I mean, for as long as I've been teaching, I have to say every bit of 85% of my classroom is females, and that's just a very consistent thing. Now, it might be because women are more often more empathetic. Maybe they feel like they can fix them. Maybe there's something about them that they feel like they want to identify. That where a lot of males don't think like that. It's a hard question to answer, but it's a valid one that comes up often.
Maybe we're looking for clues.
No, I mean, the reason I started watching it, honestly, is because I was bored one day and I had been in bed. But once I started watching it, I started thinking, okay, well, now I can watch this, and if I see this, then I know to run away, or if I'm put in this situation, then I know what to do. Yeah. That was my mindset. And plus I love history as well. So it kind of had that historical draw for me as well, learning about old cases and things like that.
Real documentaries. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Although sometimes when I think about women's interest in serial killers, I look at some of the ones that have gotten involved with serial killers, which is another topic altogether, so that's it's interesting for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Chris Watts getting married.
Yeah, Chris Watts is getting married.
He is, that's right.
Richard Ramirez got married. Ted Bundy, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
She got pregnant, visiting with him, and yeah.
I just can't even imagine.
Really, if you look at some of the stuff that goes on online, as far as some of the, I don't want to use the word groupies, but I can't, it's kind of hard to not say that, as far as people like Ramirez, particularly Bundy, and believe it or not, Jeffrey Dahmer, who wouldn't be interested in any women whatsoever, but there is a certain draw there that's hard to explain.
Yeah. I think somebody should do a study on it one day.
They should. I've read some papers and a couple of books on it, and I'm not seeing anything that's convincing me of anything just yet, but hard to say.
You never know.
So we hear the words in your book, and in general, like psychopath, sociopath, narcissist, and antisocial personality disorder. It's thrown around all the time.
Right.
Okay. But what diagnoses or personality traits actually show up consistently among serial murderers?
Well, I mean, there's some diagnoses that you see in the DSM, or like with personality disorders, like a lot of serial killers have sort of an obsessive compulsive behavior to them, especially when they have ritualistic behavior. Not all of them, but sometimes. They have to be considered narcissistic to a level that's hard to even fathom. I mean, these people are killing people for their own pleasure. So, I mean, it's narcissism to the highest degree.
Mm-hmm.
Sociopathic labels and psychopathic labels aren't really found in the DSM, but they really are descriptions of a much more predatory type criminal or offender than somebody who simply has antisocial personality disorder. I mean, we can kind of go around with that a lot, but a lot of people in the field just look at everybody as having antisocial personality disorder and just maybe higher levels of it. But I believe that calling somebody a psychopath is legitimate. I think you're talking about a different kind of criminal. You're talking about an offender who's more violent and certainly more predatory than your average person who just commits a lot of crime.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And on the other side of that, is there like a serial killer trait, because I think the McDonald triad has always been, that thing that if you have that, you're going to become a serial killer. And I remember in the 80s and 90s, hearing, if you killed animals, if you set fires, and if you wet the bed, isn't that the triad, right? Yeah, I remember growing up and hearing that, saying, sure, oh, they're going to become a killer, and so watch out. And so I remember, as a teenager watching kids, and I'd be like, ooh,
How many boxes do you check?
As far as the triad's concerned, I mean, it's come in and out of favor with theorists. It's probably more popular in the 70s than any other time, but it's gone in and out. But the thing is with the McDonald triad is you're talking about the actual theory there is that if all three things show up, you're talking about somebody who is likely to be violent, not necessarily a serial killer, but really it does make sense if you look at somebody who has the impulse control problems of somebody who has light enuresis or bedwetting, somebody who is not only probably sexually excited by cruelty to animals, but has the prerequisite breathtaking lack of empathy to be able to do something like that. And somebody who is probably been interested in fire setting at a sexual level as well. These are three things that they're not just isolated behaviors. They're behaviors that represent flaws in a personality that's going to point to violence. And so I think that while it's probably not thought of very often these days, don't talk about it all that much, I still think if you've got somebody who's got those kind of behaviors and those kind of drives, yeah, of course they're going to be violent. I think they're going to be violent. It's very high degree of violence in people like that.
Okay. And so can someone possess all of these traits or most of these traits and not be violent and not be somebody that we need to watch out for?
I'm going to say yes, because I don't believe in 100% of anything. You
Okay.
know, so, you know, that just, you know, it's going to be a minority. And I think if you're around somebody like that and you've seen all three of those boxes checked, you should keep your head on a swivel, whether they've done anything or not. But
Yes.
yeah, that's how I feel about it.
No, when I was going through your book, one person in my life, you know, came up, and it was a woman, you know, and I just found it interesting that it was a woman out of all the weird people I've ever, you know, interacted with, you know, and so I definitely keep that person. I keep an eye out for that person anytime I interact with them.
And you should be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, you should keep in mind that a psychopath and a sociopath are both on a bit of a spectrum, for lack of a better word, that not all people that show psychopathic tendencies are violent. A lot of them are, you know, but some of them just like to use other people and commit crimes and get away with things, you know. So it just being a psychopath isn't enough, you know, or a sociopath. You need more than that.
Yeah. And what were you going to say, Nancy?
I have a podcast called My Mom Married a Murderer, because my mom married a murderer. And
Good title.
it fits, catches some attention. But just that grandiose behavior, the narcissism, I mean, it's just dripping with it, you know, when I read this. And I don't believe he killed anybody else, but I just, you know, read some of this and I'm like, you know, for even just that unfortunate, that one action, you run into those people who just have those traits, and you keep an eye on them.
Absolutely. You're right.
And Nancy, your life basically says serial killer in one thing, or in your situation, on a pig farm trailer with a murderer already.
No, he wasn't there yet. He was
wasn't there
introduced
yet.
later.
Okay.
Yeah. I was 25 when my mom brought him around.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
My sisters were younger, so it was a big disruption, another disruption in our lives. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, I bet. No, but every time you say that, it just is like, oh, that's the setup for a serial killing.
Boy, do I have a story. It's called My Mom Married a Murderer.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so when we're talking about traits, we're really talking about risk factors rather than predictions, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Exactly right. That's a good way to put it. Really, I don't like to make predictions at all, but yeah, that's true. That especially people that could be considered crime victims, people that might be vulnerable, and all women certainly. You know, I mean, they should be thinking in those terms. They should be thinking in those terms at an early point in their lives. Somebody ought to bring it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a wise.
Yeah. I'll take a class, right? Yeah.
Okay, so biology and its effect on violent behavior. What evidence do we have that biology contributes to the development of extreme violent behavior?
Well, at the very base, we've seen people that have had structural or physical damage to certain parts of the brain that have had personality changes and literally reflect violent behavior because of that. So that sort of points to a certain point in the brain that could be in control, things like that. To go further, the research on specifically psychopaths who are thought of as being biologically based, as opposed to sociopaths who are thought of to have learned their behavior, they have a lower anxiety level. They're usually seeking some sort of input and excitement. So there's, again, biological factors that affect their behavior altogether. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of them commit their crimes and act like, you know, a lizard, you know, somebody that doesn't change their body temperature in any way or their reaction whatsoever. These are people that generally kill on a serial basis to try to find another high.
Do you think most of the serial killers, they become disconnected when they're having when when they're acting out the crimes, do you think that most of them are disconnected, or are the large majority of them actually getting something off of it while they're doing it?
Actively? That's a great question. I'd like to, it's probably a good time for me to say that I tell my students an awful lot that people tend to look for the similarities between serial killers so we can come up with an algorithm or something for them. But I like to say that we need to look at the differences when we're talking about serial killers, because they're not all alike, you know, and I think some of them that have certain drives, especially a sexual drive, are enjoying it in the moment, and they're getting that physiological rush and that dopamine hit and everything else. I think there are other individuals, though, that do separate themselves from the moment because they're just kind of completing a task that they need to complete. So it depends on the individual. I don't ever like to paint anybody with a broad brush. There's a chapter in that book that you have in front of you where I spent a lot of time with a serial killer that I met, and he taught me a lot of things. And one of the things that he taught me is that people, theorists, doctors, whatnot, they come to him and they try to get him to fit into a certain mold. And he wanted to make the point that we're different. We have different cases. Some of us sound alike. Some of them do similar things. There's an overlap in a lot of different places. But serial killers are very unique, every single one of them. And that's something you got to keep in mind.
Yeah, I know. And I think the media has pretty much portrayed serial killers as white men. And I was actually listening to one of your interviews earlier that you said that the modern serial killer now is not the averagely the white man, right?
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
Okay.
You need to look at that on a bigger picture. I think now you're starting to get into like the definition of serial murder. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about
can you give us the definition?
Sure, I can give you a definition or a couple. There's a lot of theorists out there, and they all have their own definition. But let's just say the FBI says a serial killer is somebody who kills 2 or more in separate events. And it's that simple. You know, in the past, serial murder definitions have been much more complicated. They included cooling off periods. They included different motivations. There was a time when they had 3 as a max, as a minimum. And now the FBI says 2. I shouldn't say now. This was around 2005. But this was a way to at least categorize serial murder. When you want to talk about actually, I don't know how to put this. You're going to have a lot of different types of serial murderers now than you had in a previous time with a different definition. Like once they started saying that serial murderers were just somebody who killed 2 or more, and they also said things like they weren't interested in issues like did they do it for money? Did they do it for this reason? We used to eliminate a criminal enterprise, you know, people that were involved in the mob or people that were involved in gangs. Now we look at serial murderers who just kill 2 or more in separate events. So now it changes the racial component drastically. There was a time when probably in the early, what they called the golden age of serial murder, and, you know, in the early 70s, you know, you did have more white males that were serial murderers, probably 60-ish%. Now it's flipped around. It's technically, statistically, more black serial killers, but you're adding a lot of different types of crimes and different types of statistics into our base that we didn't even look at that stuff in the 70s and 80s. So you know, it's not that serial killers have changed, it's that the way we count them has changed, and that's why it's different. And another reason that I want to kind of touch on there is the media had no interest in black serial killers in the 70s and 80s. They weren't even paying attention to them. They were out there. They were absolutely out there. I mean, the highest success rate serial killer, as far as the FBI is concerned, is a black male named, Sam Little. And he had 93 kills. This is a lot of people don't even know who Sam Little is because he's not interesting. His kills aren't particularly Ted Bundy-esque.
I don't know. I find he's very interesting, but yeah, go ahead.
I do too. I don't disagree with you at all, but Hollywood doesn't, and that's what matters when we're talking about who makes movies about another movie about Ted Bundy, so it's easy to think that they're all white males and they're all Hannibal Lecter and brilliant, but they're not, so there's a lot of issues about serial murder that we think we know, but we don't.
Yeah. The fact that Samuel Little could still recall his victims and paint them, and people use those drawings to identify some of his victims is absolutely fascinating to me.
And they were accurate. They were scary good. So, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Okay. So, when you wrote your book in 2012, neuroscience was already becoming increasingly important in criminal psychology. Has anything we've learned since then changed your thinking?
No. I still believe there's a biological factor. I think some people don't agree with that. But my particular theory that I wrote about in 1996, it hasn't changed. I haven't changed my opinion on it. I still think it's a combination. I think it's what people call a diathesis stress model, where you have a certain biological predisposition that's set off by factors in a person's life. And I think that accurately accounts for the variance in the type of individuals that are serial killers. I mean, some people have had horrific lives and experiences, and then other people have had the same experiences and don't become any sort of a criminal. On the other hand, I mean, you can look at somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer, who he had problems in his life growing up, certainly, but I don't know that I would call them worthy of becoming a serial killer. On the other hand, he had a mother who was taking a laundry list of medications when she was pregnant with him. So, I mean, they all have a different combination, but it all seems to me some level of predisposition plus a stressor that sets it off.
Okay. So what you're saying, or could somebody conceivably be born with virtually every biological risk factor you discuss and still live an entirely nonviolent life?
I'm going to say yes, because I don't believe in 100% of anything. I'm going to keep going back with that, but
but it's true.
Yeah. But realistically, it would be much higher percentage, correct?
I believe so. Yeah,
okay.
I do.
Okay. So at what point do you think biology stops being an explanation and personal responsibility begins?
Oh, don't take me wrong. I don't believe that biology being a factor or a key factor removes any sort of responsibility. I've never said that. I would never say that. Yeah.
I'm just asking a general question.
I think what to go towards what you're talking about, I would start thinking about somebody who is a sex offender. This is somebody who absolutely has a biological factor in their behavior and in their motivation, but it's still 100% up to them to find a way to not do that. So I think that's what we're talking about there.
Yeah, because a lot of times people will just put it on the biological factors and excuse a lot of it. Yeah. So that's why I was asking.
No, that's a really important factor. I mean, I will say that I've used as a test question in the past because we talk about biology and its responsibility for behavior. What are some of the drawbacks to that sort of a theory? And the main one is you're going to have people that say, well, nobody's responsible for anything. Then that's all there is to it. And I've never said that, but people will go there for sure.
Yeah, they will. Nancy, did you have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Okay, so your theory, the central purpose of Real Life Monsters is developing your own theory of serial murder. Sorry, I'm having trouble talking. Can you walk us through that theory in plain English?
Well, I kind of alluded to it when I mentioned the diathesis stress theory, and that's what that is. You're talking about some sort of unnamed biological predisposition, whether it's brain structure abnormality, whether it's something that the mother is responsible for in a prenatal situation like Dahmer, and also like Richard Ramirez, that people miss that a lot as far as things that have happened before a birth. There's a lot of different factors that we could look at, and then you could combine that with some sort of trigger in the person's life. Again, some sociological or environmental factors can be obvious. You have like Henry Lee Lucas and that awful life that he had, or Elaine Warnos, the same thing, the things that she grew up with. You could see those things setting somebody off. But again, you talk about somebody like Dahmer, where the worst thing in his life is his parents' awful divorce, and how that affected him. And while I would never, downplay that, I mean, I know a lot of kids that would say, well, my parents left me in the house at 18 with a refrigerator full of beer. I had a good time for a while, but this was, drastically difficult for him, and it came into play with his whole thing about being abandoned and that sort of stuff. So, there's pretty good variance there is where those two factors come in as far as the theory is concerned.
Okay, so is there one component of your theory that has to be present, or is it always a combination of factors? Well,
I haven't proven my theory, so I don't know that I can nail that down.
Okay.
I wish I could.
What's keeping you from doing that?
Well, I guess I need proof. I guess I need some absolute solid proof, and it's hard to really do that. It becomes anecdotal, and as time goes on, I haven't seen anything at all dissuade me from that, so that means a lot. But I still like that person I talked to in that book. We talked about the things that affected him in his life, and I never really was able to nail down a aha moment with him. So I gotta believe the biological factor was more part of it. But this is somebody who had no empathy whatsoever. I think he was born with no empathy whatsoever. He was sadistic from the beginning. Those are both things that could be considered a biological factor at first. So like I said, I wish I could prove this factor or that one to be more important. But I guess that's why they call it theory.
Is there anything that you would change today, since it's been so long since you came up with it? That's a long answer, but I'll try not to do that. As time goes on, let me use an expression my mentor used to tell me. Yeah. He said to me once, he goes, the longer I study this stuff, the more I realize how little I know. And, right. And you know what? He was an international serial killer expert, Dr. Steve Egger. A lot of people in the field know him and revered him. And I never knew anybody that knew more about it than he did. And after years and years, the two of us looked at each other and went, wow, what just went on there? Sometimes, it develops, so that's just something that goes on. Yeah, no, I get that. Okay. So let's move into, actually, did you have any questions on that, Nancy?
No, I'm good. You're doing a great job.
So let's move into the different serial killers that you examined for this book. I think there were 8 of them.
Right.
And so Andre, what was
Andre Chikatilo?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
He's from Russia. Give him a break.
What made his case important as testing for your theory?
There is a lot about Chikatilo that's fascinating and a little different than other killers. First of all, he's not from the U.S., which is interesting. He had that background in with Russia with the war, where he was exposed to cannibalism, and it's something that he engaged in later on, which somebody could say, well, that sure looks like that made an impression on Andre, that's for sure. Yeah. This is somebody who had sexual dysfunction all the way back, and but who was highly involved in sexual assault and child molestation. Excuse me. But the thing with Andrei Chikatilo, he's one of those serial killers who committed his first murder ostensibly by accident. He was assaulting a little girl, and he ended up killing her, didn't plan on doing that. And at that point in time, he became a serial killer. This is somebody who was more than happy to just assault children and sexually assault children and wasn't really thinking about serial murder, but he found out that that's what he really wanted to do, and he never turned back from that. And he committed what they counted as 54 murders, which is an enormous number. But he was in a set of circumstances that allowed him to be more effective than other individuals. But still, there's a lot about his situation that appeared to have biological bases to them. And you could also look at the experiences that he had, especially once he started getting into cannibalism. So, Chikatilo is a fascinating case.
Yeah,
Okay.
when you talk about environmental factors, him being in Russia and then the American serial killers, like what did make that different as you were comparing?
As far as being in Russia, as opposed
Just, environmental factors that he would
Sure.
have been beyond.
One thing about
cannibalism.
being exposed to the cannibalism was something that was, obviously important to him, and that's something that he went on later on. But this is somebody who was operating in a situation where nobody was looking for him. I mean, he at one point in time he was considered a suspect, and he was thought of as, well, he's a communist. He's a member of the Communist Party, so he can't be a serial killer. This is something that allowed him to kill scores more individuals because they ignored him. He also ran into a bizarre situation where they tested his blood, and the blood test was a failure. I mean, it should have connected him to a crime, but it was a false negative. And another individual was actually executed for his crimes during that investigation. So there were things that went on with Chikatilo's case that are not comparable to other cases that I looked at.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's interesting. Oh, man, I bet that happens a lot. A lot of false arrests and.
But that guy was a murderer too, if I remember correctly.
I believe he was.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
I remember that he was, because
You're probably right
for the situation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, you hate to see him be executed for the wrong crime, but if he's a murderer, then there we go.
Yeah. Okay, so Arthur Shawcross, what does he contribute to your theory that you couldn't demonstrate as effectively with other offenders?
Arthur Shawcross was unique in that they did a lot of biological analysis on this guy. Dr. Krauss, who I spoke to at length about this in New York, looked at his blood levels, genetic makeup, things. People have not looked at other serial murderers like that. They certainly didn't back then. So this is something that really jumped off the page a little bit. He noted that the cryptopyrrole level for him was off the charts. We couldn't prove that is something that makes somebody a serial killer, but it's something on paper anyway. But the analysis for him was quite a bit different than most serial killers that we look at. So that's one thing that I would say about him that was certainly unique. On the other hand, his expert witness, Dr. Otnell Lewis, she tried to say that his experiences in Vietnam were that they caused him to become overtly violent and connected to that kind of behavior. Sort of a different way of going, but she actually had that opinion about everybody that she was, defending. So that was kind of something that you would expect. He was also hypnotized. And I don't know if you've ever seen the films of Arthur Shawcross under hypnosis. No. It's a pretty bad act. That's all I got to say. I mean, if that's really, how he was reacting, well, good, Artie. But I'll tell you, it didn't impress the jury. I'll say that.
I want to move on to Jeffrey Dahmer. He's probably become like more culturally famous since you wrote the book.
Yes.
What do you think that the public fundamentally kind of misunderstands or gets wrong about Jeffrey Dahmer?
Wow, a lot. There's a lot about Jeffrey Dahmer that people don't understand. I think one thing that's really important, I in my last book on the insanity defense, I looked at 3 cases in extreme detail. And there was Bundy, Dahmer, and Gacy. And I talked to different people involved in those cases. And I talked to Dahmer's attorney, Wendy, that blonde lady that sat at the table with him every day for a year. And everybody knows who Wendy is just by remembering her sitting next to Jeffrey. And one of his expert witnesses, Dr. Fred Berlin. And they gave me insights to Dahmer that I didn't have before. And one of them that Dr. Berlin talked about was the fact that this is somebody who went 8-9 years between his first and second murder. This is somebody who killed somebody the first time, Stephen Hicks. It didn't appear to be planned. It was something that he had fantasized about. It was something that he was absolutely going to do, and that was the day that he did it. But he went years not killing. And this is not a typical story with a lot of serial killers. Serial killers usually, after they kill that first time, they are like, that's what I wanted to do. And they increase. They accelerate, but with him, this is somebody who knew he was sexually motivated by dead bodies, to be lack of a better term, and this is the thing that excited him. Necrophilia was what he wanted to do. And his defense, I think this was a mistake, but his defense stuck to that story, that his insanity defense was about necrophilia. If I was his defense attorney, I would have been all over some kind of the use of the word psychosis, because that's what people are looking for in a case like that. But people didn't really understand the idea of killing somebody for necrophilia. Really, it didn't really work, but it really was his motivation, to be honest. But to get back to the separation there, that between the first and second murder, he went out and he brought home mannequin to try to, sate that image. He, picked up men in, bathhouses and drugged them to try to simulate that sort of thing. I don't know another serial killer who went to the degree of trying to simulate what he wanted out of a dead body without killing somebody. This is really specific. It's an important fact. So when you go into the courtroom and you say, this guy tried not to kill people, he really did, and that's what was their point, was that this is why they considered it to be an irresistible impulse, because he fought it for 8-9 years and he still did it. So that's how I would answer that question.
Before we move off of Jeffrey Dahmer, do you think that he had anything to do with the Adam Walsh?
No, he didn't.
Okay. I just wanted to ask.
Yeah. I looked at that. I got some stuff from Florida and whatnot, and I don't buy it. No, I don't know if Otis Toole did it. He's as good a candidate as any for that particular murder. I don't believe Dahmer was involved.
Okay. So this guy is probably the most fascinating person on the list. Edmund Kemper. He's unusually articulate and seemingly very self-aware. How much should we trust serial killers' explanations of their own behavior?
That's a great question, because serial killers are liars. When I went in to interview the guy for the book, for that chapter 9 there, that was the first thing I had on my note list is, he's a psychopath, he's a liar, and he's going to try to play you. And I had that on a piece of paper. I couldn't bring it in there because they didn't let me bring in any pieces of paper or any recordings. I had to just listen to them. Yeah. But that's the big thing that you had to have in your head, is that they are liars and they'll try to color their behavior and their experiences. However, when you've got somebody like Kemper, who was so matter-of-factly honest about what he did and why, and he accurately pinned it all on his mother. Now, I'm not blaming his mother, but his mother was the point here, okay? Yeah. And after he killed her and her friend, he was done. He probably would have killed more, because that's what he does, but he was done at that point in time. Very, very different than most serial killers, for sure. But I think when you have somebody that spoke in the way that Kemper did, much like Dahmer did in the courtroom and to the officers that interviewed him, I believe both of their stories, every bit of them. I think they were telling the truth. Probably
Can that intellect and that psychological vocabulary be more able to like manipulate researchers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a good example is that is Bundy. Bundy was the same guy, but he lied and lied and lied. Okay. And this is somebody who sort of kind of came clean before they executed him. But this is not somebody who you could compare to a Dahmer or compare to an Ed Kemper. I think you've nailed that on the nose, that you're talking about somebody who lies for a living. That's what they do. It's their natural default. Yeah, that's where they go. But you have to also realize that psychopaths want to tell you how smart they are. They want to tell you how different they are from other people. It's really important for them to get that point across to you. Mm-hmm. And part of that is telling you and other people what they did and how smart they were when they were doing it.
Yeah, Ed Kemper is probably the only serial killer I would write if I were going to write somebody. I'm not going to, but I'm saying I'm saying I know, and I have heard that as well, as he quit answering a long time ago. But he is just like the most fascinating one that I have seen, just because of how. He sat at that cop bar.
He did. But he loved being at the cop bar. He wanted to be a cop. He couldn't do it. So next best thing is hang out with them. Of course, this is somebody who ended up talking to John Douglas and helped him develop the BAU. He directly helped the research business of serial murder just by the information that he provided him. But this is somebody who really wanted to tell people stuff like that. He talked about when he basically skated on his first two murders of his grandparents. They said it was a mental disease, and then he told everybody later on. He said, I told them what they wanted to hear. I knew how to play that game, and I learned how to do that. So this is somebody that imparted some very important information, and it was all accurate.
Yeah, he did. So let's move into Anthony Sawell. He isn't nearly as culturally relevant or famous like Dahmer and Rader, but why was he important enough for you to include him in your theory?
Well, it's not much of a population sample, but when I went to I started with 4 and back in 1996 when I first started this, and then I kind of doubled the group, and I needed to look at a black killer. I also needed to look at a female killer, which is why I added Warnos. Mm-hmm. Certainly, one black killer doesn't represent a speck, in the sandbox. But that's basically one thing that I wanted to look at. And it was interesting because Sowell really he was kind of Dahmer-esque. He really was. He was more like most white killers than I expected him to be. I thought he'd be a little different, but he operated with what my teacher would refer to as less dead victims, people that aren't looking for them. And, that's kind of what I got from him.
Can you break that down a little bit more when you said he operated like a white serial killer? You said less dead victims, but is there anything else? He thought about his victimology. This is kind of what Sam Little did as well, and it was kind of that he got comfortable in the environment that he operated with. He knew what kind of victim that he would go after that wouldn't be, looked at very much like Ridgway, that same kind of thought process. So that's what I mean by that kind of, behavior, and not like some killers that are very sloppy, or are gang killers or criminal enterprise killers that operate in a different way. Where I was looking for some kind of a racial component, and that's the kind of thing that could be considered a racial component. But he didn't act that way, in his behavior. He seemed to behave like Gary Ridgway or Jeffrey Dahmer. Interesting. I wouldn't have thought that. Okay.
Names. Warnos.
Smooth.
When I met you at CrimeCon in Vegas, I asked you if you'd covered any poison cases. And those are mainly women, and you only have one woman here on, but she didn't act in a way that is normal with the secret killing and the, you poisoning stuff. She acted more like a male who was doing serial killings. Can you kind of talk about her? What you found interesting? Sorry.
You're absolutely right. I mean, like Soul, she acted more like a male serial killer, and she basically went on a spree. I mean, this is somebody who was a career criminal, for lack of a better term. I mean, she's a sex worker and drugs and blah blah and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, I think it's underrated for her behavior, the role that her girlfriend played. And because it seemed to me that a lot of her murders were about acquiring assets for Ty. That's basically what it looked like to me. I mean, I know a lot of people want to give her a pass and say that I think, what she explained in the courtroom had some validity. I just don't at all. I mean, I don't think this is, at this moment in her life, with the hundreds of customers she had, all of a sudden, this handful of people within this amount of time were all trying to kill her. I don't buy it. It doesn't make sense to me. But the thing that does make sense to me is her relationship with Ty and the fact that she was trying to take care of her. And once she brought home a car, or got, a bunch of possessions off of somebody, she discovered, this is working for me. I'm going to continue doing this. Mm-hmm. And then when it came down to it, the cops put it on her and said, what about Ty? What about Ty? They played that properly, and she absolutely said she didn't do anything. I'll admit to all of it to protect her. This is the same behavior. This is the same thought process. Everything was about her, and that's the same thing that she was doing when she was committing serial murders.
Hmm. Yeah, she's a very fascinating woman as well, or was. So were there any meaningful psychological differences between male and female serial killers, or do we sometimes exaggerate those differences?
Well, female serial killers usually represent less than 10% of the population sample. So obviously it's quite a bit less. I mean, obviously their
MO.
I didn't want to say MO. The way they go about their murders, the tools that they use, okay, are different than males. Okay, they'll shoot somebody, they'll use poison, unlike what a lot of male serial killers do. But early female serial killers, a lot of their motivations were money, or as far as getting rid of husbands, or getting rid of people that might have some money, like running a hotel and stealing money from people that come in there. That kind of a female serial killer. Female serial killers today, they're way more like males than ever. I mean, a lot of them have sexual points and sexual reasons for their murders. They'll do violent acts, not like in the past. I really see the female serial killer acting more and more like the male serial killer every day. So that's a real change in behavior to me.
Interesting.
Yes. So let's move on to Dennis Rader.
Yeah.
Okay. He maintained family, right? Employment. He was involved in his church outwardly, right. Ordinary existence while he committed these crimes. Mm-hmm. What does Rader in particular kind of teach us about the idea of what we should somehow be able to recognize in dangerous people? There's monsters everywhere.
Well, that's a good point, because the fact is we wouldn't have caught him if he didn't step on his own toes, and this is important. We shouldn't have caught him. He was getting tired of not being famous anymore and being in the paper anymore, and he played that whole game with that floppy disk and got himself arrested. This is somebody who could have retired and looked at his grandkids and watched documentaries about that killer in Kansas City or wherever that they never caught. That's how it should have been. So I don't know that Rader is a good example of what you should be looking for, because this is somebody who fooled his family. I mean, he had plenty of personal foibles that, he was power hungry and he kind of wanted to be a pretend cop at one point. And there was a lot of things about his personality that were, not likable, but I know a lot of guys like that. I know a lot
Right.
of guys. I know a lot of guys that lived a life that Dennis Rader was living in his day-to-day life.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't pick out as a serial killer. So that's a tough question. He's a very difficult person to go there on. But
So then he asked the church, can you trace this? I mean, he asked the officers, can you trace this floppy disk?
yes, he did. I guess the best way to go is if you've got a serial killer who's motivated by fame and power, he's gonna make a mistake at some point.
Yeah.
But that's something an investigator looks at from the outside. But if you're somebody in the circle of a Dennis Rader, boy, he'd have to make a real mistake for you to pick that out. He really would. He was good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And he's actually probably the scariest one on the list. Him, and I'm going to throw one at you that you haven't talked about in a little bit that scares me.
Okay.
So Rodney Alcala, he appeared on The Dating Game in the middle of his offending period in all his glory. What does someone like Alcala teach us about charm, social presentation, and our assumptions about who dangerous people are?
Well, you know what? Rodney Alcala's on the cover of that book, right?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Okay. I wanted you to know that in case you didn't notice. Rodney, yeah, there he is. He's on the left side with the glasses with the blue reflection of his computer in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Rodney's Ted Bundy with gray hair. Basically, this is somebody who, people didn't even think about this guy until his cases came around again. This is somebody who was tremendously successful in the California area, went to New York. He actually moved around a lot. And this is somebody he was a good looking guy when he was younger. He managed to walk around with that camera on the beaches and talk to girls and schmooze them enough to say, hey, I think you could be a model. Could you take pictures for me? I go back to, women as victims. And I don't want to say that, guys that are complimentary or take pictures are dangerous. But, you always have to be thinking of that in the back of your mind. Am I being a victim today? Am I in a situation where I'm going to be vulnerable? Because, sometimes they do make themselves vulnerable. They go somewhere with somebody that they shouldn't go with at that point in time. They should protect themselves a little more than that. But Alcala is a tremendous, example of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was even going to camps and all kinds of things as a counselor. And and I think he only got caught because his case came back around in the news or something like that. And a witness that had called in or something like that called back in.
There were details like that, but he had done an absolute mystifying high wire act, getting found guilty and having it get thrown out, and found guilty and having it get thrown out again. He finally went back to trial, and as time went on, you did have more, ways to prosecute somebody, and it worked out for him. And really, given the amount of murders he had, you would hope that it would be an eventuality that you would get somebody like that. But wow, he got away with far too many for far too long, no doubt. And that Dating Game episode, I can't watch it enough. You just look at his face and you look at this guy. Would I know anything about this guy? I don't think I would. He was creepy. I know lots of creepy people. I do,
Well, the fact that the woman actually picked up on it and turned down the date, thank God. But
yeah, which is interesting. I'd love to talk to her because I'd love to know what went on in her head, because in person she picked something up. The hair in her arms stood up, and I'd love to have her explain that to me. That would be an awesome conversation.
Yeah, it would be. Okay, so we're going to move on to one that you didn't put in the book, but he also hadn't been caught yet, and I think he was fairly young when you wrote that book. So Israel Keys, he by far, I guess Edmund Kemper's the most interesting. Israel Keyes is the most fascinating because of the way he operated and who he was. And I mean, planting kill kits all over the country and maybe even into Canada and stuff like that. And some of them have never been found. So what's your thoughts on Israel Keyes?
I think Israel Keyes is probably one of the most underrated, underexplored cases out there. It's like you said, I mean, his organization level, okay, is kind of shocking, really. And he's just a killer that really, took his craft very seriously. And, like you say, this is kind of a terrifying, brilliant individual. And really, one thing that people overrate with serial killers is their intelligence. I mean, they think they're all Hannibal Lecter, but they're not. But Israel Keyes, wow, that's a special one for sure. I think that would be a great case study to look at.
Yeah, I try to consume as much information as I can find out on him. He's one of those guys that I really want to know what was going on with him and really get to the bottom of how many people he actually did kill, because I think that's quite a high number.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there really isn't a ton of information on him like a lot of other people, So yeah, that's one that's worth looking at in depth for sure. I agree with that.
Yeah, and his motivation for not telling investigators is because he didn't want his daughter to know.
Yeah, right, for sure.
So that says something about him too. I mean, and he at least had love for his daughter, and wanted her to have an easier life than, because he is fairly unknown.
Yeah, he is. That reminds me of the killer I interviewed for the book, who, I chased him to get him to talk to me, and he kept telling me to get lost, but I kept bugging him anyway. And, he kept coming back and saying, you need to understand, I'm not proud of this. I'm not proud of anything I've done. Every time my family saw me on television, I just, made me sick, and the situation that I was putting them under. He was concerned about his wife. He was concerned about his son. This is somebody who did have actual concerns about his family when he was being prosecuted.
And so that's why. And so that's why you used Rick as his name. You changed his name to Rick, and that's why you did that, to protect his identity, so he could talk to you.
I did. Yeah. We went back and forth, and he just didn't want to give me the information that I wanted. And it occurred to me, and I thought, it's not terribly important to me that I use your name, because I know a lot of serial killer books kind of operate on gore and excitement and this guy's name or that case. And it's not what I was looking for. I was looking for an intimate conversation with somebody that killed people as a serial killer, and somebody that would trust me enough to tell me why he did that. And that's what I was looking for. And I thought trading his name for that kind of access was worth it. I thought this could blow up my face. People could say, I don't know what his name is. You could have made it up. People make stuff up. So, that was something that I was concerned about. I have to say that when I'm in the classroom, I have a tendency I don't tell them who the killer is, but a lot of people come to my serial murder class that have already read the book and they're really into this stuff. And if one of the first things they say is, "Who's Rick? What's Rick's name? What's Rick's real name?" And I always say, you know what? After 16 weeks, and we talk about this stuff, if you can come to me and guess who it is, I'll tell you. But I won't bring it up. And I've stuck with that. I still do that.
Oh, did anybody guess?
I've had people guess. I have.
And were they right?
Oh, both. I've had people be wrong more times than not. But I've had a few
people get it right.
I've had a couple of people nail down a couple of Easter eggs I put out there, and they did figure that out.
How did?
And I'm sorry, I use the name Rick because it's kind of a tweak on a friend of mine. So.
Oh. How did you determine when he was being truthful, or what did that look like as you were talking to him?
I tried to see if he was getting anything out of the conversation. I mean, you can tell if somebody's excited about talking about something. He never acted like, I want to talk about the violence, I want to talk about the rapes, I want to talk about this or that. And I tried to see behind his eyes what he was getting out of it. I certainly am not a mind reader, that's for sure. But I believe that if I was talking to somebody who was getting off on talking about reliving the violence, that I'd be able to figure that out. And I mostly had to drag that out of him, So when I was dragging certain details out of him, I felt like I had a good idea when he was being truthful. And I was kind of trying. I know at one point I mentioned this in the book. You might have read it, but I tried to get to what the purpose was. Why did you get in that mode? And he said, well, it's like stealing a car. When you're done, you get rid of the car. Mm-hmm. And that's what he said. And he said that matter-of-factly. He wasn't trying to be flip or clever. He said that with a straight face. And I think that's an honest opinion. I think that's what he thinks.
Yeah. That's scary.
Interesting.
I actually think you should reach out to Bill Nagara. He was an inmate in San Quentin. I think he had life. And he helped Ken Main's former cold case detective solve a serial murder case, or one of the victims or a couple of the victims, something like that. And he ended up getting out of San Quentin recently, and he was at CrimeCon, I heard, but I didn't see him.
Really?
Yeah, but he used to take care of all of the serial killers on death row in San Quentin.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like medically, he would go in there and take care of them. And so he was like their companions and stuff for years and years and years. And so he helped Ken solve a couple of cold cases through that.
You have to give me that name later. I'll look at that for sure. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. And I told you before this that Nancy and I have unfortunately gotten ourselves into the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case. And and she was the woman who murdered her mother, and supposedly it was because of Munchausen by proxy. But do you know anything about that case? And because when I was looking at your book, Gypsy was one of the people that constantly came to my mind, especially during that first couple of chapters.
The fantasy part, living in the,
everything. I mean, it was almost like she didn't have like maybe 5 things out of, that whole chapter.
Right.
And we do have evidence that she had talked about being a serial killer with Nicholas Godejohn before they murdered her mother. And she was highly motivated by sex. And a lot of us think that was the ultimate reason for the murder.
Sure.
So do you know anything about that case?
Yeah, I mean, like most people that follow a lot of this stuff, I mean, I'm definitely familiar with that case. It's a famous one. I mean, we talk about Munchausen or facetious disorder, it's such an extreme example of that situation. You almost don't even want to use it as an example of Munchausen anymore. I mean, the mother was certainly that type of offender, but what you ended up with Gypsy is, I mean, she's as much a psychopath as anybody I've seen. I mean, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to say that I diagnosed her from a different distance. I will never do something like that. Oh, yeah. Just my opinion of what I see is that she looks like a psychopath to me. I mean, this is somebody who absolutely has an empathy issue. And now maybe the way the things that her mother did to her and treated her, and things that in her upbringing took her to that path, maybe there's a reason for that. But I think she gets too much of a pass every time I hear her name. And this is not somebody who should be signing autographs. I really have an issue with that case altogether. I'm not that's not somebody that I would normally study, but just looking at that case is kind of my opinion, my reaction to that.
Oh, that's refreshing.
Right. I have a whole Google Drive of information for somebody just like yourself to take all of that information and write a book on it. And I hope one day somebody does.
So nobody has? I mean, it's such a famous case. I would have thought somebody'd been there by now.
No.
There's so much that's been dumped in these past, even just 7-8 months. That has complicated because everything's a lie. And then you go to research, and then everything else is a lie. And so to go and dig through all of the files and try to find the truth, you've got to go through 4 lies first. And it's so big now and so complicated. And people are screaming, why doesn't the mainstream media pick it up? Well, because these newsrooms don't have that kind of manpower. You know, it would take a team years now to catch up and try to put this story together. Sure. And it's just too massive at this point, and it's hard. But I'm so glad that you are caught up on Gypsy Rose, because a lot of people only know what Mommy, Dad, and Dearest showed them, and then it stops. I'm from Springfield. I live in Springfield, Missouri. So I covered the murder and subsequent Nick's trial and all the way up. So I've been a journalist for nearly 30 years here. And it's just refreshing that you actually knew more than the average person. So thank you.
I know, right? And I didn't.
We're on the same page there.
Do anything.
No prep here, guys.
I didn't pay him anything. Okay, so your art on the back wall, I love it. And so John Wayne Gacy, it looks like it's all his art probably. And I've seen quite a few of his art either at the Alcatraz East Museum in Tennessee. And then I also went to Zach Bagan's Haunted Museum in Vegas.
Right.
And so I've seen a lot of his paintings in person. But how did you acquire those, and why do you have them?
Well, this has been a passion, this whole topic. But once I was teaching serial murder and all that, and I was being exposed to the concept of murderabilia and the fact that John Wayne Gacy paintings were out there, I'd always thought, I'd really like to get a pogo. I mean, I think that would be kind of interesting, So, and I also thought, bringing that into the classroom would be kind of amazing. I would imagine these kids have never been anywhere near something like that. And wow, I can't remember what year it was, but on eBay, somebody had 2 paintings of little bluebirds, and they were like a matching set, and they were John Wayne Gacy bluebirds paintings. And I saw those. I thought, well, those are interesting, but it's not pogo, obviously. And so I contacted the seller and I said, hey, I'm looking for a pogo. You got any idea on something like that? And he responded by sending me a scan of a Polaroid of him, the seller, with his arm around John Wayne Gacy's shoulder, holding a pogo.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I thought, that's a start. Because I had also heard that they were being, faked and all that other stuff. And I thought, I don't know anything about this. I could really make a mistake. Yeah. But the story was, actually, let me give you both stories. The story was, he said that he was involved in a punk rock group called Bloody Mess in the Scabs. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. I hadn't. But apparently John Wayne Gacy did a cover for their CD or whatever. Oh. And Gacy has actually done that for a few groups. He's done, paintings for them, and they put it on the cover of their album or something. And he said he got this picture from Gacy, and his wife wants it out of the house. I went,
I bet.
Okay. And it turned out he lived 45 minutes from me.
Oh.
So I thought, well, we can do that. And I went over there like the next day. I went over there, and there was a police car in front of his house. I thought, this is even more interesting. What happens here? So walked in his house, policeman sitting at the kitchen table reading a magazine. He's like, hi, okay. And he had like 10 other Gacy's on the wall, on the floor, leaning up against the wall.
Oh, wow.
And I said, what are we doing here, man? And he said, okay, I'm not married, never been married. That was a lie. But there's a lot of people that get a little too excited about these paintings, and sometimes they attack people that own them. And sometimes they want to come in and smash up the paintings and do that, because that's been done before. That's been done on the news. They do it for the cameras and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
You know, to show, I hate this so much, I burned John Wayne Gacy paintings. And it wasn't something that you would have heard about if you're not interested in this topic, but it comes up. So I said, well, first of all, I'm law enforcement. Hi, buddy. None of this is going to happen. Okay. You know, and he's like, I showed him my badge and everything. He felt a lot better, you know.
Yeah.
So he told me the real story, that he really was this guy from Bloody Mess and the Scabs, but they had become friends, and he was sort of an art dealer for him. And, Gacy used a number of people to carry his paintings out and sell them and all that. And I made the mistake of only buying that one at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And but we worked it out. But he ended up doing another thing. I don't know if you know this story about John Wayne Gacy, but there was a point in time where he recorded a 1-900 tape recorded phone line where people could call in, pay $1.95 a minute, and listen to John Wayne Gacy in his own words explain what's going on in the trial. And it turned out this guy, who now works for a radio station, did the recordings for this, and he gave me an original cassette that they taped of him doing it, and he just threw it in. I thought,
oh, that's cool.
Oh my God, this is an amazing thing. So he gave me that. He gave me the Polaroid that I told you about, and I bought it and brought it home, and I've been bringing that pogo to class ever since. And I got caught up in it. You know, I've been buying the Hi-Ho series, you know, the Little Men, and which is like these guys here. And he has a whole series of those Disney type characters and other ones. And I bought a series of John Wayne Gacy paintings for quite a while.
Okay. That's really cool. No, actually, I think it's really cool. I mean, I don't know if I would want to have anything like that in my home, just because I'm sensitive to whatever energy.
Well, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that, because I get that question all the time. I had a woman that was in one of my classes who was a fire investigator, and she looked at me and she goes, "You don't have that in your house?" I said, "Oh yeah," and she goes, "Is it like hidden away?" I said, "It's in my living room." And she just couldn't stand it. She says, "I cannot imagine that you have that evil presence, energy, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Yeah, I don't think like that." And we were like, we didn't understand each other, but that's how it was. I just told her I don't think that way. And I've had it in my house ever since. And but I get that question a lot.
Yeah, unfortunately, I just am sensitive to different energies, and I will full on get sick and dizzy. I have walked into old antique shops, and all of a sudden the whole room is going like this, and I'm the only one doing it.
Wow.
So don't know what it's about, but okay. So
I would like to add really quick that Gypsy Rose went through an art phase too, just for the record.
She did. Okay.
Just for the record.
She did. I was thinking about that. I was like, I wonder if she's done anything for anybody.
Is she any good?
The hair dryer. It was called Blown Beauty Art.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So, where can everybody find you before we let you go? Where can they find your books and anything else you would like to promote?
I have a website. It's www.killerinsightsllc so I don't have to word it out, .com. And you can get the information on all 4 of my books there. And I tell people that a lot of people that collect books, they like to get them signed. So I tell them that rather than buy them on Amazon, if you want to contact me, just do that and I'll sign it and send it out. We can do it that way, because like with all the cons that I go to, there are a lot of people that just like to get those signed, so that I provide that to them. Also on my website, I tell people that I do presentations or written products, or I've actually done some consulting with law enforcement and training and stuff like that too. So anything that along those lines, if somebody is interested in that kind of input or that kind of opinions that I have, I'm available for it. So the website's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay, awesome. So, and one last question before you go, just to get into the weeds.
Okay.
Serial killer, ghost, Bigfoot, or aliens, which one would you least want to encounter in the woods?
An alien.
Okay, why?
Well, I'm not sold on the ghost. A serial killer, he'd have to run faster than me. So, so I would think, I'm not sure about the alien either, but if there was an alien, that's the entity that I wouldn't want to deal with at that point in time.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen, for joining along with that. And thank you so much for coming on here and talking to Nancy and I.
Yes.
I really enjoyed the book, and I hope everybody goes out and buys a copy.
Awesome. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed coming. Thanks for inviting me.
So good
Thank
to see
you,
you,
Stephen.
I'll see you in Orlando.
Absolutely. We will see you there.
And if I have anything to ever do, I may go, but as of now, I am not.
Well, we're putting pressure on you to come, so
yes.
That energy is still out there.
Okay. We'll see what I can work up to. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, and I hope that everybody has a very blessed day and go out and do something good to change the world for the better. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Beaker with Military Broadcast Radio TV. We're your virtual MWR, bringing veterans radio, podcasts, gaming, animation, 3D printing, and a community that never leaves you behind. Download our Roku or mobile app today. Wisdom to share if you listen this week, so pull up a chair and stay for a spell. We're heading down a trail.